Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, Election Day is here. More than 81 million votes have already been cast in one of the closest and most divisive presidential campaigns this country has ever seen. Now, for Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, all that's left to do is to watch and wait as millions more Americans turn to their polling places and vote in person. The vice president spent the last day of her campaign in Pennsylvania. Her final rally was at the Philadelphia Steps, made famous in the movie Rocky.
America is ready for a fresh start, ready for a new way forward where we see our fellow American not as an enemy, but as a neighbor.
Kamala Harris was joined by a parade of celebrities, including Lady Gaga and Oprah Winfrey.
If we don't show up tomorrow, it is entirely possible that we will not have the opportunity to ever cast a ballot again.
Earlier, pop star Katy Perry headlined a rally for Kamala Harris in Pittsburgh.
I know she will protect my daughter's future and your children's future and our family's future. So Pittsburgh, let's make Kamala Harris the next president of the United States.
Kamala Harris also held events in Allentown and Scranton before arriving in Pennsylvania's two largest cities. She will watch the results roll in tonight at her alma mater, Howard University in Washington, D.C.
Well, Nathan, Donald Trump also had his sights set on Pennsylvania on the campaign's final day. The former president held his own rally in Pittsburgh, and he's already accusing Democrats of trying to rig the election.
This is that big, powerful, vicious party. No, it's a vicious machine. I mean, they can take all these bad ideas and win elections. It's like there's only way you could do that. One way. There's only one way.
Donald Trump also had rallies in Reading, Pennsylvania and Raleigh, North Carolina, where he told supporters the election is theirs to lose. He closed out his campaign in the same place he ended his runs in 2016 and 2020, Battle Creek, Michigan.
We have a silent majority, but we're just sort of speaking up. This has shown that the level of enthusiasm is 5 times greater than their level.
And on this election day, Donald Trump will head back to his home state of Florida to watch the results roll in from the Palm Beach Convention Center.
And Karen, Trump has picked up one more endorsement from popular podcast host Joe Rogan. Bloomberg's Derek Wallbank has more on the impact of celebrity nods.
I think a lot of these are baked in, right? If you listen to Joe Rogan's podcast where he's had on Trump and Elon Musk and all sorts of other people like that, you probably were voting for Donald Trump anyway. I'm not sure that there's somebody who sits there right now who says, oh, my goodness, Joe Rogan said something, I'm going to go vote the way that he does. Ditto Taylor Swift, but, for Kamala Harris. But you can see some of these move the needles, and sometimes they really do. Now, Harris has made a very big show of having a lot of former Republicans who are with her. Liz Cheney is one of those. And Trump has done the exact same thing in reverse. Tulsi Gabbard, the former Hawaii congresswoman who at one point ran for president as a Democrat, as well as RFK Jr.
And to that point, Bloomberg's Derek Wallbank notes Joe Rogan endorsed Bernie Sanders in 2020.
Well, Nathan, the battle for control of the U.S. Congress has topped $10 billion as the two parties vie for power and influence over taxes, spending, the president's agenda, and more. Bloomberg's Amy Morris brings us a preview of the Senate races from Washington.
Republicans are currently favored to gain the Senate majority based on a favorable map. Key races to watch include Montana, where 3-term incumbent John Tester has trailed Republican newcomer Tim Sheehy. Ohio, where Sherrod Brown is defending his seat against car dealer Bernie Moreno. And the wild cards. Democrats need upset wins in Texas, Florida, or Nebraska, where the race is neck and neck. Democrats would also need to keep their seats in the presidential blue wall battlegrounds of Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, where the races have tightened. Also in Arizona and Nevada. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Amy, thanks. Let's turn to Wall Street now, see how markets are faring as millions of Americans get ready to cast their ballots. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us from New York. John.
And Nathan, traders taking a pretty cautious approach as the polls are set to open. Mike Wilson of Morgan Stanley says a number of different scenarios could play out.
Bonds have sold off, probably too much. And the renewables and things like consumer goods companies that will be hurt by tariffs have really been hammered. So if Harris wins, you could see a pretty big rebound in some markets. So there's a lot of permutations here.
A coin toss election is leading some hedge funds to favor currency options that will gain from a weaker dollar should Harris win the presidency. Chris Weston of Pepperstone Group says the U.S. dollar is probably the cleanest expression of the election. Then you have an index of the dollar that is down 0.1% this morning. It fell by the most in more than a month yesterday as investors walk back bets on a Trump win. Meantime, shares of Trump media right now they're up over 5% pre-market, and then there are the prediction markets. They put the odds at 1 in 3 that the election can't be called until after Wednesday. In New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, John, thank you. Well, join us for complete coverage of the election results tonight. It kicks off at 5 p.m. Eastern with a special 2-hour edition of Balance of Power, followed by coast-to-coast Team Bloomberg coverage at 7 p.m. Get live election results and analysis with context on Bloomberg Radio, television, and the Bloomberg Podcast YouTube channel.
Well, Karen, there's been one more important vote for a new labor contract at Boeing. It's approved. The strike is over, and shares are up more than 2% this morning. Let's get the latest on the piece at Boeing with Bloomberg's Lisa Mateo. Lisa.
Good morning, Nathan. After 53 days, hourly workers, they can start returning to factories in Washington, Oregon, and California as soon as tomorrow. District 751 President John Holden called it a win for the union.
They secured a victory. They voted by 59% to accept the agreement, and they get to move forward. The strike will end, and now it's our job to get back to work and start building the airplanes, increase the rates, and bring this company back to financial success.
Now, some estimates say the walkout cost Boeing about $100 million a day in lost revenue. The new labor contract, that includes a 38% wage increase over 4 years and enhanced retirement contributions. New CEO Kelly Ortberg, he praised the President Joe Biden congratulated both sides for coming together. Now, Jefferies analyst estimates Boeing faces about $1.1 billion in higher salary costs over 4 years under the deal. Lisa Mateo, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Lisa, thank you. Another stock on the move this morning is Palantir, and those shares, they're up almost 13%. The company reported quarterly revenue above estimates and raised its forecast for operating income in the current period. Palantir cites high demand in the U.S. for its artificial intelligence software. Time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Officials have been preparing for months to keep poll workers safe on this election day. This volunteer is in the battleground state of Pennsylvania.
This will be my 16th election that I've worked the polls. I'm real concerned about safety. I never was afraid before to work the polls, but this year I'm a little bit nervous.
In Durham County, North Carolina, they have new safeguards in place. The elections director says they implemented de-escalation alert badges for all of the chief judges and site coordinators to wear. If they press the button, it immediately connects to 911. Russia is reportedly accused of planting devices designed to catch fire on cargo planes bound for the U.S. and Canada. According to the Wall Street Journal, Western officials say the incendiary devices were shipped via DHL as part of Russia's covert sabotage campaign against Washington and its allies. 2 of the devices reportedly ignited at DHL logistics hubs in July, one in Germany and another in the UK. Former Pentagon senior official Steve Ganyard says if successful, Russia could have grounded all flights between Europe and North America.
This is an extraordinarily dangerous move by Russian military intelligence. To do something like this could potentially bring down an airliner.
Former Pentagon senior official Steve Ganyard spoke to ABC. South Korea says North Korea has launched more missiles, this time short-range missiles, toward its eastern sea. Last week, they tested what they claimed was an ultimate ICBM capable of reaching the U.S. mainland. With energy and sports drinks and coffee drinks popular among teens, a new study finds the rate of kids visiting hospital emergency rooms for caffeine overdoses has about doubled since 2017. Stanford Children's Health Doctor Alok Patel says children are not heeding warnings about too much caffeine.
When in doubt, take the can, turn it around, and look to see how many milligrams of caffeine are in that beverage, or go online and look it up. Before giving your child or teen any beverage, you should absolutely know what's in it.
Dr. Patel told ABC the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends teens consume no more than 100 milligrams of caffeine daily. That's about a cup of coffee a day. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update, brought to you by Tri-State Audi. Here's John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. There's never been a Super Bowl three-peat. Kansas City Chiefs certainly look capable of being the first to do it. Monday Night Football in KC. Patrick Mahomes, 3 touchdown passes. 2 went to recent acquisition DeAndre Hopkins. Travis Kelce, 14 catches, 100 yards. Tampa Bay tied the game, scoring with 27 seconds left, but then kicked off in overtime. Never got the ball as the Chiefs went down the field.
Here is Hunt for the touchdown. Kansas City remains unbeaten. 8-0 in a win in overtime.
On ESPN, Chiefs beat the Bucs 30-24. They signed Kareem Hunt during the season. He had over 100 yards on the ground and that game-winning TD. So the Chiefs are 8-0. The Saints were once 2-0, but they've lost their last 7. They fired Coach Dennis Allen. Assistant Darren Rizzi takes over. Cowboys just 3-5, yet to win at home, and now they'll play the next several games without Dak Prescott. Hamstring injury. Cooper Rush becomes the starting QB in Dallas. No NBA tonight. Busy Monday slate, including the Knicks, ending a 3-game road trip, losing in Houston 109-97. Jalen Brunson led the Knicks with 29. The Nets pulled out a 106-104 home win over Memphis. Celtics now 7-1. They won by 30 in Atlanta. Golden State beat the Wizards. Cleveland topped Milwaukee by 2. The Cavs are 8-0. Devils 3-0 win in Edmonton. Opening night in college basketball. St. John's blew out Fordham 92-60. Much closer for Seton Hall, 57-53 over St. Peter's. 2 days after Garrett Cole opted out of his Yankee contract, he's now back in with a new deal expected. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Karen and Nathan.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager. One of the most divisive and most unpredictable presidential campaigns in American history has finally reached the finish line for Donald Trump and Kamala Harris.
We're going to have the greatest victory in the history of our country.
It is time for a new generation of leadership in America.
The former president and vice president closed out their campaigns last night in Battle Creek, Michigan and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, respectively. This morning, we are joined by Terry Haynes, the founder of Pangea Policy. And Terry, we've gotten the first official results of election 2024 by tradition. Dixville Notch, New Hampshire, and mirroring the polls, it's 3 votes apiece for Harris and Trump. Is that a signal of what's to come after all the polls close tonight? Good morning.
Well, good morning, Nathan. As Dixville Notch goes, so goes the nation, right? I think, I do think it's going to be close. I think what we end up with, though, is, for markets in terms of importance, 70% politically split Washington, and about 60% likely Harris wins. The reason I put the split Washington first is because markets want to understand policy results and want to be able to anticipate them. And what you get out of a politically split Washington, in this case a barely Democratic House and a barely Democratic Senate, is really the remixed policy status quo from the last few years that's probably negative for fiscal, negative for tax, among other things.
I want to be clear, you're calling for a barely Democratic Senate?
A barely Democratic House, I'm sorry, and a tiny majority Republican Senate. Okay. In both of these cases, what this really comes down to is gravity. You've got a situation where the Democrats are defending eight Senate seats that are competitive. Can they get them all? Yes. Will they get them all? That's unlikely. And in the House, where you've got 1/6 of the seats that are competitive and 22 pure toss-ups, I think it's likelier than not that the majority changes hands, but not that it's a huge difference or some sort of blowout.
You've been calling 60% Harris for quite some time. The final polls seem to show a little bit of a narrowing, perhaps in Harris's favor. What's the possibility that the odds could tip Trump's way?
Well, I have Trump at 40%, and I don't discount Trump's chances at all. What you've got is a situation with in polling. Think about this two ways. One is that the polls are tied, but the polls all have margins of error of 4%. So if there's margins of error at play in some ways, somehow, some way, either in Harris's direction or Trump's direction, that produces a very different sort of result. Secondly, let's remember that the highest turnout we've ever had was in 2020, and that was at 66%, which introduces its own skew, since what you're looking at in a poll is the assumption of likely voters that nearly all of them show up. But if 2/3 of them show up, that introduces another skew. So, my view of the race has simply been that, Harris's enthusiasm, her message discipline, her ability to turn out the vote probably enables her to eke out a win over Trump.
Just 30 seconds left. We've already had more than 81 million Americans turn out to vote in early voting. What does that tell you about how the result could come down?
Generally speaking, what we've had is from 2000 to today, we've had about 15% increase in voting turnout overall, and that has generally benefited Democrats. Going back elections, that's not a guarantee by any means, but generally speaking, Democrats have done very well when turnout is up.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak, your morning podcast on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed by 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 92.9 in Boston, and nationwide on Sirius XM Channel 121.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, now with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto interfaces.
And don't forget to subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. It's the latest news whenever you want it, in 5 minutes or less. Search Bloomberg News Now on your favorite podcast platform to stay informed all day long. I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.